I think consistency in itself is a behavior intervention.
Mm-hmm.
And when you say how can consistency lead, I think not just inside a classroom, but inside a building,
Mm-hmm.
right? Uh, Gum, hats, and phones, right? That's where you get a lot of. You want to have a lively conversation with the staff about expectations. Bring up one of those three.
Welcome to Learning Out Loud, where we get curious about all things teaching and learning. I'm Stefan, a regional technology coach, here with Andy, a regional math coordinator, and Carrie, a regional science coordinator. We're just three educators on a mission to dig into what works, what doesn't, and what we're still figuring out. This podcast is for teachers, coaches, and leaders who want to grow in their professional practice. We don't have all the answers, but we're asking the questions and recording the process. Let's go to work. Chapter 13, all about expectations. But before we dig in, Bill I was about to say what your title was, but I don't know. And I asked Ashley the same thing when she was here with us earlier, and I already forgot her title. So, Bill, we're going to make you introduce yourself. I'd say we roped Bill in, but because he's a get your hands dirty type of leader, he jumped
volunteered.
right in. Yep. Yeah, he threw himself in here. So, Bill, tell the people who you are and what you do.
Bill Eagle. I'm a director here at North Central Educational Service District, and I work with this team you're listening to today, and I get to have a lot of fun with them, serving our districts in a variety of areas. A lot of my work deals with TPEP, so I do trainings for principals and teachers around the state evaluation system, some professional learning community work, and this year, a lot of work around attendance and chronic absenteeism.
There we go. I think that'll play in very nicely because something that we've just circled around, I think, in everything we do, but especially this set of chapters has been around like engagement that always has a tendency to crop up. And it's interesting just how all roads lead back to engagement, which is probably the number one thing that we get requests for, right? How do you engaging tasks and how do you get kids to school, that type of stuff. So, all right, before we dig in, start to outline the chapter, no real activity for you today because I'm just going to outline the chapter for you as we'll just kind of go through it and talk about it. Before we do that, I want you to think about just the two words and the comparison between them. We've talked about this a little bit already, but we have a tendency to conflate or confuse the terms norms and expectations, at least according to Jim Knight. Like he draws a distinction between the two. And so I'm just going to ask you to stop and reflect for just a little bit on what distinguishes norms from expectations. So take a second to think, and then whenever you are ready, just start throwing out some ideas to each other. Try not to talk to me.
What are you thinking?
I'm thinking norms are more around how we're going to, maybe not how, what we believe about each other in our learning community. So if I'm thinking about a classroom, it's that we all believe that we're learners, that we believe we have value that we can add to the classroom. It's these ideas that build a culture of learning and respect and engagement. And then expectations, I feel like, are more like rules for how we're going to live out our norms. So it could be specific expectations that lead us to a norm of respect, or it could be a specific expectation that leads us to a norm of we are learners first in our classroom or something like that. That's kind of where my head is, but I could be way off base.
What are you thinking, Bill?
Yeah, I think context matters greatly in the difference in those two things. I've seen norms that include things like we're going to start and end on time, which is a
Hmm.
behavioral expectation, uh, and certainly a way to think about how you're working together. I think they're both items that could be co-created. A teacher could co-create expectations in their classroom, and that's probably a best practice. When we work with norms in the professional learning community world, we co-create those with the folks that are going to be at the table. And interestingly enough, I think norms are more valuable if people are willing to, in some respectful way, call it out when someone breaks a norm.
Could you tell me more about what you mean by that?
Well, I think that because we often, as teachers working with other teachers, are in these collaborative relationships that include sets of norms, things get on the list that are important to us. But I believe in the need to feel collegial and nice. We sometimes actually don't call out people when they're breaking a norm or bending a norm. And I think there are respectful ways to do that. I've seen teams that do things like snap their fingers to indicate someone's out of a norm, and then they have a good laugh about it and call out the norm. So it would be the same way maybe with the expectations in a classroom. You've got to have a continuum of strategies to reinforce people who are following the expectations or the norms, and also to call out when an expectation is not being met.
Yeah. And when you first brought it up, I was like, oh gosh, right? The norms like this was how do I and so what I'm landing on right now is that do we have a norm that we're going to use Zoom? We're not going Microsoft Teams. Like our norm is Zoom. And like expectations, Bill brought up, we break those all the time. We don't start on time. We talk about everything for the first half hour. I mean, but an expectation is like, it's whatever our routine or our agenda that we'll follow, and we need to do that. And we got 45 minutes with you. So how do we keep those expectations of moving the conversation forward in that time that we've allotted to do this? And so but like if we were to, like you say, call it out, like if I sent you all I still get them too. I don't know if you all get them, a Microsoft Teams link to join today for this conversation. You probably would, like you say, hopefully call me out. Like why Teams, right? And I would be breaking our agency's norm of using Zoom or whatever. But there's it's still for me, like I think we lump everything together, like you've all been saying, and we expect this, but then it's a norm. Or we do this over and over. Like we just know that we're going to be on Zoom. So that's our norm. And then the expectation is that we start at 11:30 and get the conversation rolling. So no, I'm excited where you're going to take us here, Stefan, because you're setting the table.
Yeah, that's a good outline there. And I think maybe, Andy, think about what you just said, the differences between Zoom. It can get a little murky, I think, in the professional world.
Sure.
But the reason I say that is Jim Knight might classify using Zoom as more of an expectation.
Gotcha.
Because his definition there, or definitions for these, would be specific behaviors for specific activities. Those are your expectations. And so if you're having a virtual meeting, then your virtual meeting will happen on Zoom, specific behavior or expectation for that activity. The norms are much more general and can be applied to essentially every situation. So you're talking things like be respectful, work hard, honor other opinions, make room for everyone's voices, right? And Bill, that was interesting, and I really liked. Thank you for elaborating on the calling out of when norms are broken, because the amount of times like we've set norms, and I have a tendency to roll my eyes at norm setting when I'm in a large group, not because I don't think it's important, but because of exactly what you just said. They mean nothing if they're not enforced. And I think that can be awkward. And I'll point the finger at myself in terms of like enforcing norms, probably not my strong suit, because I like to operate under the assumption of like we're adults, let's treat each other with respect and follow those norms. And I think largely that's true, but not universally. And so you need someone to call out those norms for sure. And so norms were much more of what we covered in the previous chapter. Ashley was there. It was learning environment, creating a learner-friendly environment, I think. So that was chapter 10. Yeah, learner-friendly culture. Expectations are the outlining for appropriate behaviors for those specific activities. So again, difference there might be we're going to be polite. That's something we expect all of our students, all of our staff, all of our colleagues to do, versus an expectation might be like during this lab, talk is limited to your partner at a whisper volume. So notice the difference there in specificity, right? So you've got a very specific time, who you can interact with and how you are interacting with them. And so he starts like he does every chapter with a bit of an anecdote. This one's a little bit different though. He's not talking about a teacher. He's not talking about a specific classroom. He's actually talking about an experience he had with a colleague who gave him a book, which I have never read, by Randy Sprick, Champs, A Positive and Proactive Approach to Classroom Management, written 2009. Bill's nodding. Have you read it?
Oh, nice.
I'm aware of his work. It was a precursor kind of to the PBIS work.
And so while he doesn't specifically call out PBIS, I got that impression as well. And maybe it was from the fact that the title is Positive and Proactive Approach to Classroom Management, right? Like that's the positive behavior intervention. So he specifically calls it out as being kind of transformational in his thinking to expectations in a classroom. But he's got this interesting quote, I think, in the middle of 304, right there before the header that says expectations versus rules and norms. It says, the one finding that rises above all the rest is the importance of writing, teaching, and reinforcing expectations. So again, I think that goes back to what you said, Bill, about calling out when norms are broken. He's saying the same thing about expectations. You have to reinforce those expectations. If we want students to act a certain way, we need to know what that way is and then teach it to students. So in later chapters, we're going to talk a little bit about like I shouldn't have to teach students how to do this, and we're going to cover that here as well. It's actually one of the specific questions I have for you. But he does just outline that difference between norms and expectations, and talking about how it's important to be clear on what they are and why we have them and when they are in play. And so he's got a nice little acronym. He's got a ton of these, but the acronym he has for writing out expectations for teachers to be writing out expectations for students is ATM. And speaking of rolling my eyes, students can make deposits or withdrawals in a community based on how they respond to expectations. Very cute, Mr. Knight or Dr. Knight. I'm not sure if he's a doctor, but he calls out that action, talking, and movement portion. So I'm going to go through those each a little bit, and then we'll just take a second to debrief them. So when he's talking about the ATM framework, that first A is being action. It's really asking, what is the specific task? So in the one that I gave you before about the lab, during this lab, so here's this very specific expectation. You could be taking notes, working in a group, taking a test. So here's the very specific action you're taking. And then what does talk look like in that activity or in that action. So a lot of teachers have these, but this would be one little small takeaway if you're thinking about what you can do in your classroom, setting a specific and visible level of noise in your classroom. And so he outlines, he's got like his 4 levels of like, we're at no volume, we're at a whisper volume, we're at a hockey game is his final one, but he's like, we never get there because why do you want hockey game level noise in your classroom, that type of thing, right? So what are kids doing and what is the appropriate level of talk during that activity? And then what are the boundaries in that activity? So can you go sharpen your pencil? Can you get up and ask to go to the bathroom? Are you allowed to be out of your seat? Are you supposed to be moving around? But having those very clearly outlined ahead of time, he states clearly very important. But the key there, if you think back to that first, or that quote I read at the end, it's importance of writing, teaching, and reinforcing. And so it's important to have them outlined ahead of time, but then post them in a place that's visible for students, and then give them a chance to ask questions about what that looks like. Thoughts about that framework? Anything that you've seen in a classroom, done yourself, or anything else coming to mind?
I think I have done some of those things because we've heard these practices before. I think we do hear of them. And actually, I Googled up the Randy Sprick, and we did a book study on champs. As soon as I was like, oh yeah, I've seen this stuff before too. But so, for example, I taught my middle schoolers what I called a 6-inch voice, and we practiced it. I'll be like, okay, turn to your neighbor, use a 6-inch voice, and then I would tell them, nope, that was too loud. Like you need to bring it down, like 6 inches. You're 6 inches from somebody. How loud do you need to speak? And we would practice it. And then when it got too loud, I would rein them back in and we would practice it again. And there was other stuff too that I would have students practice that like you said, Stefan, sometimes I'm like, really, I need to teach this, but really you need to teach it, especially I think in a secondary situation like I was, where the expectations can be different from room to room. And so students need to be taught what do you expect in your classroom. It's even better if your teaching colleagues have the same expectations, but sometimes that doesn't work. But at least kids will know when I'm sitting in Mrs. Haug's room, I can use a 6-inch voice during our lab activities, or I can use a 6-inch voice when we're doing whatever, some sort of collaborative work.
Harry, you mentioned multiple times in what you just said, this idea of reteach. Mm-hmm. And practice. And I think that is this idea of reinforced expectations is one to explore a bit, because we're creatures of habit. Everyone is a creature of habit. And reinforced expectations can eventually become an unspoken norm.
Yep. Yeah. I like that.
I've been thinking about the idea of, when we say use your teacher voice, because you bring up that leveling, and this is what, the hockey idea, the hockey teacher voice is hockey level, right? And I've been walking around. There's a lot of schools that are cool. They have like this microphone idea, and it's not that it's, I can be loud enough to get the whole class to hear. No, it's my tone and how I'm talking, and it just needs to be amplified by volume, So that idea of like, if, what does that look like, Carrie? That's so wonderful. Like, so if I need a model 6-inch voice while I'm just talking. I don't need to scream at the hockey level that makes the back row here, and I'm like, I would use microphone before. I don't need a microphone. No. I think it says a different tone, a different message. Like if I can't practice 6-inch voice conversations with the whole group, then they're gonna be like, dude, Mr. Boyd, you went hockey level right away, man. Like we're not there yet or whatever. So thank you for that reteaching part, and also modeling what that looks like and helping to reinforce that. So that's kind of where my brain was going.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because you said a couple of times, you guys all mentioned the teaching of those expectations, which is where he moves to next. He got a couple of methods, and he doesn't specifically say this, but one of the things I took away from this chapter was that it's about a blend of all of these things, which intuitively makes sense. And I've got my problems, actually, honestly, with the first one, so I'd like to talk about that a little bit. His first method he refers to as a boot camp. So within the first week of school, teaching all the expectations for activities, like typically pretty common, but students could forget this as they go in the long run. My issue with this is, what's the message that you're sending to students if on the first day of school they come in the door and you say, here's how I expect you to behave. You know, I think that's pretty common. And I did this as well in my classroom for a bit, where what did we do on the first day of school? We covered the syllabus, we covered behavior expectations, we covered the student handbook. And I guess I'll kick that to you as opposed to answering my own question. What is the message that I'm sending to my students on the first day of school when I do that?
Okay, first, okay, that's assuming we didn't do the expectations with them, right? 'Cause
Correct.
That's also
Yes.
that's like you had it. You're like, okay, I got to print off all these handouts for September, and it's like, you know, May, right? Like that kind of a thing. Like it's already done. Yeah, that seems like I'd love to have them start and bring in their own, like what are their expectations to get that voice. And I think
About 3 pages ahead.
Okay, because I was like saying, like that's kind of the idea. I feel like we've had this conversation before, but then once that's established, then it's like I got to remind them. Remember that very first day of school, we talked about what we were going to do here when we go outside, and we haven't gone outside till spring, you know, or whatever that may be. So that's kind of where I was like always in the moment of bringing up and, you know, calling out what these expectations are, just like if we're doing a strategy to solve a problem or whatever that may be. Hey, notice, look, hey, this is a new strategy. Let's talk about it. We're not going to talk about all the ways to solve things in the first day either. So that's kind of where I was when he brought that up. Like, let's do it together first and then always build off of it. But
Well, let's dig into that, because he says in a couple of pages, he calls that an advanced strategy, like co-creation of expectations. And my thinking is the reason that this one's a little bit more advanced is co-creating expectations with students takes a lot more time than me just telling you how to behave, right? And there's also an inherent understanding of how the classroom works if we're co-creating something. What you started talking about a little bit, well, what are the advantages of co-creating expectations? Again, not norms, expectations with students around a particular task.
Well, hopefully you have more buy-in by the students. Like if they feel like some ownership over, well, we said collectively that this was how this activity was supposed to take place. And we had a conversation about it. And it goes to what we talked about around, I can't remember what chapter I did, but where they have some choice, where they feel like they have some autonomy, and how that supports students in engagement and feeling like they have some control over their own lives.
Well, I think anytime you co-create things with students, it's an opportunity to reveal thinking. You find out what kinds of things are important to the students, what their needs are going to be successful in the classroom. And it's an opportunity to shape some of that thinking. If some things don't come up that probably need to come up to make the classroom function well, asking questions to see if they will get to those items. And at times, making sure they do get to certain items that will be important expectations for the classroom. But co-creating opens up that revelation of what's in a student's head. And you're, I think, going to find out a little bit about what their needs are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also then I can ask them what do you do or what do I do, depending on what the expectation is, either the teacher or the kid or the student. What do we do when we don't follow those expectations? How do you want me to remind you to do whatever, right, that expectation? And then how are you as a kid or student going to remind me if I forget to do one of my our expectations, whatever those may be? I remember having some about giving dates of when things are due. Like that was an expectation for kids of me. And if I didn't do that, how would they remind me? Like, you didn't tell us, or when's it due, Miss? They'd always give me those prompts. So that was, again, that interaction of these are our ways of learning and our ways of what we want to see in our classroom. Same thing when we ask, hey, what do you want to have your social studies classroom look like? What are those non-negotiables that we want to have around instruction materials or way we present tasks? Same, what are our non-negotiables in this classroom, and what do we do to help us support that? So that's kind of those ideas are together, and then the prompts to get them moving along are also together, kind of a thing. So that's good ideas that brought forward and why those are important.
And also it blends in with his other like how to teach expectations which is like we need to verify that they understand it, right? Like if they're co-creating these expectations, and it can be as simple as, we're about to move to the rug. What level should our voices be at? And we come to a quick consensus that we're going to be at level 1 voices as we transition to the rug, right? And we're setting that expectation because we have in action, there might be some talking and there's going to be some motion in there. And so very, very quickly, I wrote down in the margins here, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? So you want to come up with, be thinking about some things, definitely some routines, but also being prepared for that just-in-time learning. So he's got these 3 methods: your boot camp, your just-in-time learning, and then verifying that students understand the expectations. Just being prepared for that just-in-time learning or application there as well. But that brings me to my next question, just coming around those teaching expectations. We've recorded out of order. So in a future episode, we're going to dig into this one a little bit again. But a common frustration for teachers, especially at that secondary level, is I shouldn't have to teach them when it's okay to ask to go to the bathroom. I shouldn't have to teach them when it's okay to be talking to their neighbor. They should know this by now, right? And the amount of times, guilty, I said that as a 7th grade teacher, this is something you should know, right? But if I had the wherewithal in that moment to stop and think, they don't know. Right now, clearly they don't know, right? That this is not the appropriate time to do that. Or this behavior is a communication of some other unmet need, and it's probably not sharpening their pencil at this moment. Mm-hmm. We get that frustration a lot. Shouldn't have to teach them this. So the question is, why is explicitly teaching these minute, specific behaviors critical? And is there a way it can actually save you time in the long run?
Yes.
All right, bad. I asked you a yes or no question. How?
It started with a why, which you can't answer with a yes or a no.
Okay. Fair. Well, I'll yield my time to you, Carrie, to process the why part.
Well, I was thinking, so why is explicitly teaching these tiny behaviors so critical?
Yeah.
I think because it's going to save you time in the long run, and it's going to save time with corrections. Like you'll spend less time getting into, I'll call them battles with students around little things like, why are you sharpening your pencil right now while I'm giving notes, or whatever it is that you direct instruction. If the teacher's up here talking, like now you're having to stop your teaching in order to correct a behavior that if you had just taught in the beginning, that interruption would not happen. And there wouldn't be this disjointed instruction that students were experiencing. So I guess that's why I say it's critical, is because it is going to save you time in the long run, and it's going to save you conflict with students and engaging in conflict with students.
Yeah, totally. And that idea, it's a shared experience that we can always refer back to, right? Like that, either the expectation or that experience, like we could say, we came up with these together. This wasn't just Dr. Boyd's ideas. These were everybody's ideas. And now that's why things move forward. I'm remembering about this time where I was sitting in with this friend whose dad was an administrator, and they had all these like referral slips that were that carbon copy codes, right? And this teacher had the same teacher just submits all these things, and it was like forgot pencil, stood up when wasn't supposed. I mean, just. And I'm like, I asked, I go, what are those papers? And like, those are the referrals that you write up on kids. And this teacher had all these ones that like that referral time of forgetting a pencil versus that's that time I think you catch up, right? Like you're not battling what Carrie said, all these little pieces that are like these turf wars, or what we talked about before, that power, right? The power over these kids, and you're like, you didn't bring a pencil? Instead of just walking down the hallway in the class and picking up the 3 that are on the floor and then putting them in somewhere in your class. I don't know. So what did you see out there, Bill? You're an administrator. You're one of our instructional leaders, because we're just talking like the teacher level. So what are those things that you could pick out of that lens of getting time back as teaching critical behaviors to expectations of some students?
Well, as an administrator who has dealt with the referral end of things, I've seen the kinds of referrals that you just talked about come into the office, and I I think there has to be a balance between what we're going to be explicit about in teaching in the classroom and where we can bring in teachable moments throughout the course of a year. If you were to teach explicitly all of the things that might occur or nuances that could come up that might be a something that gets under a particular teacher's skin, it could be a pretty extensive list. But you go with the things that you know are going to be your personal hot buttons for sure, and look for teachable moments. There are going to be moments throughout the course of a year when something's going to come up, and it's an opportunity to remind a student and then have a discussion later with the entire class about maybe we should reset this expectation, or maybe we need an expectation around this item to bring clarity. What I don't want to see as an administrator with things like this is it takes me 3 weeks to get through all the explicit things I feel like I have to teach to make my classroom function.
Yeah.
What are ways to avoid that?
I think teachable moments is one way to avoid that. When something comes up that needs a little attention, you break from what you're doing. If it's important enough, you take that break, you reset an expectation, and make it a teachable moment for maybe a single student or maybe for the entire class.
So you think kind of focus on those big picture things, those big bucket items, because one of the ways, just to kind of round out the chapter, one of the things he identifies as like a why would you do this? Why are explicit expectations important? Is this one didn't really occur to me, but like to reduce teacher fatigue. Like if your classroom is without specific, clear, posted expectations, then you're going to be making thousands of decisions consistently about, is this okay? Is this, and then it's a lot of reactive, not proactive pieces there, right? So identifying those big, like maybe expectations on how we enter the classroom. You know, when you do move, maybe of some of those consistent expectations of when you are up walking around the classroom, you know, this is the level of your voice and this is the speed that you're walking, those types of things. But I'm hearing you highlight the importance of being open to teachable moments, right? That flexibility piece there.
I think what you mentioned about being proactive is also, in a way, a teachable moment. Before a major transition within a lesson, we're moving from the desk to the carpet. Okay, that kind of thing. That's a teachable moment. I'm going to remind you of some expectations, or maybe teach you the expectations for the first time. This is how we move to the carpet, and thereafter, then it becomes a reminder, and it puts some context to the rule for the students to share that expectation prior to them actually engaging in the activity, versus I'm going to talk about transitions to the carpet at the beginning of the class, and we may or not actually be transitioning to the carpet right now. But let's go over the expectations anyway, because it's going to happen some point during the year. No, I think it's better to use, maybe call it a pre-teachable moment prior to the expectations, that preventative set.
Yeah. It's that idea too, like, well, we started off at groups and tables, and then I just had to put them back into rows because they couldn't handle. It was like, well, so when they were in groups, what were your expectations in groups during tasks, all those, just that idea, like, they should be able to work in groups. Well, if the expectation from the year before to come in here, don't you want to set up your own expectations of what it looks like to be in a group, a team member within a group versus a individual versus a participant in a partnership or a listener of other ideas, like all of those things. And it's like, but the strategy to remove best practice to help out with an expectation of listening, I need some support on that. Like, how do I keep them in the groups and just teach them how to be functional in a group? You know what I mean? I don't know. Did anyone else seeing that or hearing that out there too? That was like we know that sitting an individual thing, you learn better by talking and processing and working together. Those are those skills that we talked about, whatever podcast ago, right? Of communication and problem solver and, a team member. And if we're not teaching them kids how to be a team member and we just expect them to already know how to be a team member, we're just going to not help out what people need when they graduate or whatever. So it's like one of those tough system level conversations or problems or like how do we start getting into that territory of teaching them all those things that we really think that they should have already.
I think it goes to what we've shared here, like teachable moments, practicing, and then redirecting and practicing. Like, all right, this is what I'm going to be looking for today as you work in your teams, and then laying out here's the expectations as you're working in your teams. And as soon as those expectations are starting to be pressured, it's a redirect. It's hey, I've noticed our volume is getting too high. Remember, the expectation is a 6-inch voice. Yeah. Or I notice that I have a lot of people out of their seats when you need to be working in your team. Or it's the flip of that. And I really appreciate how Blue Team is working quietly and staying in their seats, right? The positive flip and just reinforcing what it is that you want to see. And they'll come along. Of course, there's going to be struggle.
That's right.
But then you also have something to fall back on, right? Like the idea of being proactive is that consistency will take some of that load off your plate, because it could be as simple as like getting someone's attention and pointing to the poster on the wall, right? Like letting them do the cognitive work as opposed to you constantly redirecting, right? You can automate some of those things so you can spend some of your time doing something that's more impactful or more necessary. And so, I mean, anything you can do I always refer to it as, past Stefan looking out for future Stefan. That's never the case. It's always past Stefan procrastinating and screwing over future Stefan, and present Stefan is just stuck in the middle. But that's a great way, right? If you're ahead of the game on that one, then having something to fall back on, and then if it's established, it's consistent and kids know what to expect, And my final question for you is in that same vein. How can clear and consistent expectations lead to higher levels of engagement or deeper thinking?
I think consistency in itself is a behavior intervention. Mm-hmm. And when you say how can consistency lead, I think not just inside a classroom, but inside a building, right? Gum, hats, and phones, right? That's where you get a lot of, you want to have a lively conversation with the staff about expectations, bring up one of those three, right? Gum, hats, or phones. And no matter where you stand on some of those things, if you, as a staff, make a stand and exhibit some consistency, it takes a lot of the stress and strain of being the only teacher who's enforcing this, or I'm the only one who's not doing this. Students will find a way to play on that, and we don't often appreciate being singled out as the one who allowed this or the one who doesn't allow this. Consistency is so important in it is an intervention in itself, I think.
Related to that, I think it also just builds that culture of, for a student, of feeling like they belong and are cared about, because that's where we get in that's not fair, or Mrs. Haug doesn't like me because she called me out on the hat that I'm wearing and none of the other teachers called me out on the hat that I'm wearing. So Mrs. Haug is mean, Mrs. Haug doesn't like me, and now that student can have like a feeling toward me as a teacher that I don't like them. So when they come into my classroom, they could be disengaged and we could have real problems around just me enforcing a rule that nobody else is enforcing. So I think that goes to that consistency too, where in consistency, we build students' understanding of what it means to be a student in the building, but also like that they belong here, that the expectations are clear, they know how to behave, and therefore they feel cared about. And show up, related to your attendance issues, Bill. They show up to school because they feel like they belong there.
Yeah. I wanted to bring forward, Carrie and I are doing a lot of work with building thinking classrooms, and Carrie shared this idea of like working in teams. I dropped it into the chat here. We could add it to our Canvas course too, but this like really like it's that continuum, and Carrie gave it to a teacher, and then we went out to the district and we saw it up already at the boards right next to the place where they're going to be working, and the teacher went through, and all these ideas, like, this is what this means. We want to collaborate. This is what this looks like. Are you working together? Are you taking turn? All those things. And, just that chance of like consistent, that's right there, right in front of them. But then also if they notice something, you could pause and give your own, like, all right, where are you on this? Where are you? Let's pause the conversation. Where are you right now in working together or independently? Are you huddled together or are you by yourself? Because you can have those structured conversations right in the moment. And then, so that was really cool to see that idea, like, okay, you can use something, and there might be other areas you want to talk about what collaboration means or what it means to be group work or teamwork or whatever. But there's also some, sentence prompts or some starters where, that you could use as a teacher, but also are available there for kids, that you could give them those examples of those things that we've already talked about. So I thought it was just cool that we shared something. The teacher was able to utilize it right away to build that team building structure, because she thought it was like that was an area she wanted to work on. So it was kind of a team rubric of sorts. So.
Cool. That's kind of it for the chapter. There's nothing super deep about it, and it really boils down to prior planning, consistency, and making sure those expectations are visible, and best case scenario co-created with students. So the only thing that, we touched on a little bit, but I did asking that last question. I remember before I was a teacher, my mom was in the classroom and she said something about kids crave structure. And I was like, I think I've said this before. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard my entire life as like a high school student. Right. And then as soon as I heard about, like in college, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I was like, right. That structure satisfies those low levels of Maslow's, because like you're taking care of that psychological safety there. And so building in or creating those strong, consistent expectations will give students the tools they need to reach those higher academic levels, to dig in deeper, because they're not worried about the classroom being too loud or there being chaos around them. You can those types of behavior expectations can increase engagement if done consistently and followed through on. And again, not an overnight thing. Just because you're satisfying those things, you're giving students the tools to be successful. I think in a previous and later episode, we've talked about just appropriate levels of rigor and making sure those things are accessible. It's not just about giving kids hard things. It's about providing them the appropriate scaffolds to get there and engage in those. And detailed and clear and consistent expectations are the first step there, I think. Final thoughts? Or we just want to wrap it up?
No, this looks good. Are they posted? Are they kids involved with it? This is great. This is good conversation. I think we did a good job today, everybody. Bill, what do you think? First time on? Will you come back?
I will come back.
Yay!
Yay!
Thank you for being here. It's good to have more voices in the room.
Yep.
Yay.
Thanks for learning with us today. If something we said sparked a thought, made you nod, or something Andy said made you roll your eyes, we'd love to hear about it. Share the episode, tag a colleague, send it to your PLC, or just keep the conversation going within your own team. You can connect with us via the feedback form in the show notes, and we'd love to hear your thoughts, feedback, and suggestions for topics to cover in future episodes. We're all growing together, and that starts with paying attention to our own practice.